This is Backstage with the Queensland Choir. I'm your host, James Haywood. This is the show that introduces you to our members, and we have a very special episode for you today because we are going to get to know our new musical director, Robert Stewart. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure.
Now, when you first became our director, I remember being quite excited, not only because of your experience with choral music, but also because you are a Canadian.
Aha!
So I would like to explore your early life in Canada, if I may. So can you tell me what was your childhood like? What was it like growing up in St. John's?
I grew up on the east coast of Canada, so right on the Atlantic Ocean. St. John is a port city, a bit of an industrial city. So there's the Irving oil family is big there. So oil refineries and paper mills and that sort of stuff. And I always remember music in the house. My parents listened to two types of music, country and Western. And so there was always something going on in the house like that and music playing. So yeah, I think I had a house full of music, although none of my relatives were professionals. So it was all amateur music making.
Right. So I don't see any country boots on there, though. So if
I've adapted to Australia now, so R.M. Williams, no problem.
So how did you move from, I guess if it was country music that you were surrounded up, or you heard as a kid,
Yes.
Where did classical music come into the mix?
Well, I was very fortunate. I started singing probably, I think I made my debut at 4 for our local outing society, it was called. And I was very fortunate. My year 1 teacher, April Mills, she was an amateur singer. She sang in a well-known group in our area called the Friends of Music. And she had actually had her piano in our classroom. And she told me that when she would play music, she would notice that I would move to the rhythm of the music, and I would actually conduct.
Right.
So I do remember some of my earliest memories is listening to, I think it was something on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and running to the kitchen and getting a wooden spoon and using that as my baton. So I started, she decided to check me out, see if I could sing. And from there, two things happened. So the first was she also had a talent program on our local Canadian Broadcasting Corporation station called Stardate. And so I made my debut there, announcing, welcome to Stardate, and then after that, performing quite regularly on the show.
So was that a radio broadcast though, or
It was
that
television.
Live? Oh wow,
it was a television
fantastic.
show. Yeah, and then the other great thing was that her friend was a man by the name of Walter Ball, and Walter Ball conducted a boys' choir that was sponsored by our local Rotary Club. It was sort of founded, I think, in the 60s when the Vienna Choir Boys came to town, and some of the Rotarians thought, well, we could start something like that. So sadly, I think they don't exist anymore. They were around for about 50 years or so, and then it kind of just folded. But I remember he came to class in those days, I think, when you could do that without a blue card. And he said, can you sing? And I was a bit indignant and said, well, of course I can sing. And he said, well, come along to our rehearsal. We have rehearse on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. And if you come on Thursday, there's chocolate milk. Because Baxter Dairies was one of our sponsors.
Right.
Yeah, so I joked that I probably got involved in music because of chocolate milk, actually, more than anything else. So yes, and then from there also I was at St. Joseph's School, and the cathedral was just literally about 50 steps up the hill from us. And I had a very good principal, Brian McCarthy, and he... with the choir master, Ian Anderson was his name, a good Scottish guy from Aberdeen. And they presented us with the choice of having church choir practice at school on a Friday afternoon, or we could do classes. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I knew what I wanted to do on a Friday afternoon. So I joined the choir as well. So did a lot of choir singing from a very, very early age.
So later in your life, you sort of moved into opera, but it sounds like your early life was in choral music.
It was in choral music,
basis.
and choral music was always my love. And even at university, it was interesting because in my undergraduate at the University of Toronto, the push wasn't there for singers to sing opera. The idea was you started off in art song and learned how to sing before going into opera. And now I'm having worked at several different places around the country, you know, that's kind of not the focus. Everybody really quickly wants to get to opera. But in our situation, you weren't allowed to do that even until I think third year would be very rare. Fourth year you might. And to do a course in opera was actually a graduate level course.
Well, could we talk a little bit about your studies now?
Yeah.
Who did you meet while you were going through university in terms of vocal coaches, and who left an impression on you?
Yeah, well, my first singing teacher was also the conductor of the boys' choir, eventually after Walter Ball. His name was Kevin Langford. And he was also my piano teacher. And one day we were at camp. We were having our weekly, you know, our before everything starts in August. And he was a little late. And my friends sort of started, you know, oh, get up there and do the rehearsal. So I conducted the rehearsal, just a piece. And I didn't know that Kevin had actually come up the stairs and was just there watching. So afterwards he took me aside and he said, well, we're going to add conducting to your lessons now. And he said, and you're going to conduct that at the end of the concert, at the end of the week for the parents. So I wound up going to Mount Allison, which is about 2 hours away. That's where Kevin went, and a lot of people in our area went there. And it was a great place. It was sort of that, you know, you think of a university town. It was a university town. One of those places where when university's in session, and there's only about 2,000 at the university, but the population of the town doubles when university's in, those kinds of places. And it was great, and I loved being there, and I loved working there. But I I represented my province in the National Youth Choir of Canada.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was there that I got to mix with people from all over the country. And there were a group of guys from the University of Toronto, and they said, "Oh, you should apply." And I thought, "Oh, you know, University of Toronto's, I think it's the largest music school in Canada, and I think it's the 5th largest in North America." So for a guy from a very small city, it was very daunting. But they were talking about things like artists that we would know, like Cecilia Bartoli and Bryn Terfel, who at the time I'd never heard of, you know, and like it was just like their bread and butter. And I thought, oh, I think I need to be doing that. I think I need to know who the people are in my profession.
Well, what sort of music was surrounding your life at that stage then? What recordings were you listening to?
Classical music all the way. I think I stopped listening to pop music. It's the 90s, you know, so there's nothing good came after the 90s. I think my first, actually it was Helmut Walche playing Bach, toccata and fugues, including the D minor fugue, you know, and Mozart. And then I also had the good fortune as a summer student to work in the local library. So the first year I was in the bookbinding department, repairing books, which is interesting. But our audiovisual librarian said, "Oh, you're into music. Next year, come and work in my department." So the following year, I had about 3 days with her, and she went on maternity leave. So I had this entire department to myself. And one of the benefits was that, you know, a library is supposed to be quiet, but in the music department, we could actually play recordings. And so I just went through
like a kid in a
candy store, and I just played things. I listened to things. Oh, this looks interesting. That looks interesting. And I carried that through to university. I used to, because my musical upbringing was probably not as sophisticated as some others, so I'd pick a random score off the shelf and then try to find a recording of it and then sit down and listen and yeah. So that's how I kind of came to learn about a whole bunch of things.
Mostly choral music though, or?
No, actually I tried to, you know, I wanted to listen to all the Beethoven symphonies and all the Brahms symphonies, and you know, I wanted to listen to all the big works and things like that too.
But so just returning to your studies,
Yeah.
Did you primarily focus on, was it primarily focused on choral singing, or was it singing operatically? Or?
No, for me, my studies, my main focus and my main love was singing lieder and art song. But you know, as a singer, you don't make much money singing lieder and art song. Opera's where the money is.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and my and my great passion was oratorio. So combining choir with solo type. It's, oratorio is like opera without costumes, And so that was something. At the same time, uh, to earn some extra money, I was singing in a big church and getting paid for that. And I was also a member of a community choir as well. I was one of the section leaders for them, and just exposed to a whole bunch of things that way. So we did have choir at university. I sang with Doreen Rao, who a lot of people know from her work with children's choirs, and that was great. One of the not the first time, but one of the first times singing with orchestra. So that was just a big treat to be able to do that, and it was always a love of mine, but never really thought, oh well, that's a career path. You know what I mean?
And were there any particular singers that you were trying to emulate throughout this time, or looking to for inspiration?
Oh well, I love Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, of course.
Who doesn't?
Exactly. So anything that I saw his name on, I listened to quite a bit. And then there were some Canadian singers that I really loved. Russell Braun was always a big hero, and he studied with my teacher, and so it was once in a blue moon, I would wind up having a lesson before or after him. He was the guy who's singing at the Met, and he's still touching bass, just having lessons and little checkups here and there. So that was always a thrill. We had a lot of really great singers, a lot of great music happening in Toronto. And that was kind of one of the reasons for the move, was that Mount Allison was great, but things that happened in the town were because the university put them on. But in Toronto, there was there were multiple choirs, and so you really cut your teeth. And as a section leader, sometimes then you get hired by other choirs to, be a ringer, we call it. So you come in for a rehearsal and then dress rehearsal and do a concert, and just sort of help to bolster numbers and things like that. So it was a great education, actually. Learning sight reading, learning about music and all that sort of stuff.
What a rich area to spend your formative years.
Yeah, well, and I was very lucky because our conductor, Lydia Adams, who's mentor of mine, she was so great to work with. And then we also had an oratorio class that we had to take with a fellow named Douglas Bodle. And he was very, very interesting man. He was in some kind of an accident when he was younger. So he talked like this. He had something wrong with his voice. But he used to say, I'm the world's most frustrated singer. But he was a beautiful organist. And he was also a harpsichord player back in the days where the harpsichord was just coming back. And so people would come to him for lessons on the harpsichord and things. And he could show us everything. And it's just wonderful. He was the type of professor where he taught for 3 hours on a Friday afternoon, and anybody who's ever taught at a university knows that that's like the death time. Like, nobody wants to go to a lecture, but everybody did. And he taught for 3 hours. You had to sign in for 1 hour, but most times people would stay for 3.
Goodness.
And different people from outside. I remember the double bass player from the opera orchestra was a regular attendee at our oratorio classes, So people would come in. He was that kind of a guy, very inspirational.
And what was the key takeaway, like the thing that he taught you that stuck with you to this day?
Well, my goodness, there's so many things. I have so many Douglas stories. I think one of the things, and one of the big things that he always said, and I think a student actually wrote a thesis on him, and it was called Make Every Note Beautiful. He would always say, make every note beautiful. And that stuck with me. Yeah.
So tell us, where does the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland fit into the picture?
Well, back in my day, it was called the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, and then they had a name change. I think it was in my first year. It was. There's an association between the University of Toronto and the Conservatoire, and Sir Philip Ledger brought an orchestra over, and our choir sang Mozart with him. I wasn't allowed to be part of that group because I'd only just joined the university, and these people, this was sort of a special choir of people from the area who had been rehearsing for about a month before. But I just remember talking with their students and just being so excited by them that I thought, oh, that's some place that I'd like to consider. it was interesting back in those days. It was very common to see your progression doing an undergraduate and then doing a master's degree. So it's kind of like a finishing school. And so I set my sights on there. When the time came, I'd auditioned for Juilliard and made it to the second round. So I was pretty chuffed with that. But I also auditioned at the Manhattan School of Music and was accepted, but very expensive. And I had also applied at the Conservatoire, and they had a deal where you could pay University of Toronto fees and study in the UK. And they would do a swap, so they would send somebody over and it would be the same thing. So it meant I could study there without paying international fees, which was, I think the Canadian dollar was like, it was something like 5,000 Canadian dollars to the pound or something stupid like that. So that was within my reach. So, and it was an amazing experience to be there.
So it sounds like up until that point in your life, you'd been dabbling in art song, opera, oratorio, choral music. I guess, why did you decide to go down the choral path and not more the operatic side of things?
Well, it was something, I mean, a few things. I find that conducting, there's a big teaching element. And I used to think to be a teacher, you had to be perfect. And I wasn't perfect. So therefore, I couldn't be a teacher. I've since learned that being a teacher is being a learner. So you just have to be willing to learn. But I sort of, I don't want to say I fell into it because it was always there, and I had always done some ad hoc conducting, and I had studied conducting and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't until I met my wife, Claire Preston, and she really sort of put the wind up my backside, if you know what I mean, to give it a go. And it was kind of being able to match my skills, you know, shaping music, plus what I know about singing and those sorts of things. So yeah, so it's, I don't want to say accidental. It wasn't entirely accidental. And part of it was from necessity. I decided, you know, opera eventually became a love, and it's what I wanted to do. But pardon me, I had a lot, my young family was starting up, and my father was a truck driver, and away on the road. He tried to be home actually he was home every weekend, but, you know, 5 days a week, didn't see him. And I remember being in New Zealand doing Carmen, and I was there for about 10 weeks. And my son said his first words and stood up for the first time. It was like, it's not the career that I want.
Right.
Yeah, because I want to be there for my kids. And that's when I sort of started more down the conducting and teaching. Yeah, I discovered that I called it coaching. I liked coaching singers, but it was teaching. You know what I mean? And I discovered, actually I like it, and I'm good at it, and and I found that it informed my own performance, which was really great as well. Got me thinking about it. So yeah.
And what was one of the, I guess, because I know that you've worked for the Elmer Eisler Singers.
Yeah.
So for those who live in Australia and may not be familiar with that organisation, can you tell us a little bit about the Elmer Eisler Singers?
I believe the Elmer Eisler Singers started as the Festival Singers of Canada. I think that was 1954. And they were the first professional choir in Canada. And they became very, very well known. If you listen to the Robert Kraft produced recordings of Igor Stravinsky, they are the choir that Stravinsky preferred to work with. So if you listen to his Symphony of Psalms, they're the choir on the Symphony of Psalms. It's, yeah, I know, it's like mind-blowing. And so it's interesting, and I really, you know, it really saddens me to see what's happening like with the ABC and other broadcasters, because for somebody like me coming from a very small city, I would listen to the CBC. I grew up listening to the Elmer Eisler Singers. You know, back in the days on cassette tapes when you'd wait to press record, and I had a recording of them singing the Messiah that I probably broke the cassette because I just played it over and over and over and over. And so there wasn't a time that I didn't know about the Eisler Singers because they were always on the radio. And then fast forward to when I was in the National Youth Choir, as I mentioned before, Elmer Eisler was the conductor of that choir. And I think it was in my second year, a singer was ill. And so they asked if I would fill in. And it just so happened it was a tour of my area where I grew up.
Oh, fantastic.
So part of it was singing in my hometown with the Eisler Singers, which was pretty cool. Sadly, that singer was very, very ill and had to resign, and they had asked me to take his position. But at the time I thought, oh, if I don't finish my university degree, because they were so busy, they rehearsed every day, they traveled, singing with the symphony, singing with the Mendelssohn Choir, that I would have had to have left university. And
Wow.
I know my parents would have killed me, you know. But eventually I did get to go back and sub in. I was a substitute singer when they were on tours, and that's how I met my wife. So.
Lovely. And your wife and yourself, how did you come to Australia?
Well, I think it was my wife had actually gone over to Toronto, and that's a whole other interview.
Yeah.
But the short story is that she was the first assistant conductor that Jean Ashworth Bardell ever had with the Toronto Children's Choir, and she said, "Well, I can't give you a full position, but my colleague." Lydia Adams at the time, conductor of the Elmer Eisler Singers. Elmer had passed away, and Lydia was his long-term accompanist. She needs an accompanist. So between that could be a full job. So the first day, we were getting ready for a tour, and I just arrived back from Scotland, and Ed. Anyway, my wife doesn't remember because she said I was so terrified. But Lydia said, "Oh, and by the way, we have a new Australian accompanist." Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. So we went on a 2-month tour of the States,
Yeah.
and we like to say that if you spend 2 months on a tour bus with anybody, and you could still be friends, then there's a lot in that. And anyway, eventually we got married, and a few years later we had our first child, and then the homing beacon went off.
Right.
All my family was on the East Coast, and Australia just seemed like a great adventure. I love traveling, so when my wife suggested we move back to her hometown of Melbourne,
Yep.
yeah, it seemed like the right thing to do.
Was it at that time that you started to work for the Melbourne University?
Well, first I started working with I started off doing my master's to convert it into a doctorate at the University of Melbourne, and then I just sort of didn't feel that was the right fit. So I wasn't a permanent resident at the time, so I was sort of the stay-at-home dad at the time.
Yeah.
But I had done some lessons with the head of voice at the Victorian College of the Arts. And by the end of that first year, she said, "Well, because you have a master's degree, you're allowed to adjudicate the undergraduate recitals." So I did that, and she liked that. And she said, "Oh, and your French is great." She said, "I need a French teacher next year, and we'll give you some students as well." And I was terrified. I thought, "Oh no, what do we do?" But no, it was like a duck to water. So that was kind of how it started. And then from there, other positions, so Monash University, and then the Melba Conservatorium, which was then, it was sort of its own entity, but nominally under the umbrella of Victoria University. And I started teaching at those places, plus at secondary schools as well.
You've spoken a lot about your love of teaching. Can you describe your style?
Well, I sometimes nutty professor, I think maybe is a good way to describe it sometimes. No, I just, I'm very passionate. I think because I had really great teachers, not just in music, but throughout, secondary school, for example, had some wonderful teachers. And it's just that thing that you're passionate about, to help somebody else become passionate about it is a real thrill. A lot of teachers talk about witnessing the aha moments, and it's true. It's a real gift to, be working on something with a student or with a choir, and students meaning children or even adults, you know, and just the idea clicks. Something happens and we get it. It was Jean Ashworth Bartle once, back in the days, we call it BC, before children, when my wife and I were flexible, and we go, oh, I'm at the opera company tonight. Oh, I'm doing a concert around the corner. Oh, I'll come up and turn your pages or something. And Jean was doing a secondary, a schools sort of thing where different schools would sing and she'd work with them. And I remember distinctly, she said something and they didn't get it. So she said it again in a different way. They didn't get it. Maybe went on third time, fourth time. Anyway, they got it. She was using a microphone. She leaned over and she said, if they don't get it, then it's our fault, not theirs.
Yeah.
So being able to explain things in multiple ways, you know, and to help them to get through to find this wonderful discovery, which is the thing that music is. It's such a wonderful discovery. And to be able to ignite that, as was ignited for me, in a way it's kind of that idea of paying it forward, you know, because I benefited from such great people. I have a responsibility now to the next generation. And that's the wonderful thing about music, is that a teacher can trace their lineage back to, you know, so-and-so to so-and-so to so-and-so to Liszt or something like that, you know?
It's very true.
Yeah. So you're always passing along to the next generation. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed about you, though, I mean, I've sung in choirs for a long time. You seem to match the vocal side or the audio side of singing with the body. So in terms of, you know, focusing on mouth shape, and when you're doing that, you're also circling your mouth so that you kind of you got it kind of ticks in your head, if that makes sense, for lack of a better phrase. Can you explain why is that your approach? Because it does seem quite unique, but it does seem to work.
Well, I think part of it, I think it's two things actually. A lot of my teaching, although now I'm in a co-educational school, a lot of my teaching has been with boys. And so a lot of the research tells us that being physical is a way that they learn. So it comes from a chap, I think he was at Harvard, called Howard Gardner. He used to call it the multiple intelligences. I think it's been kind of debunked a little bit, but there's an audio way of learning, a visual. Some of us, we say, oh, I need to see that. You know, so visual learning. And one of the ways of learning is called kinesthetic. So that's movement. People, and boys a lot, they learn by moving. So I try to add physical actions to something because it's another way of checking for understanding. So do you understand the concept? It's great for me because it's a visual. I can see, oh yes, that person knows what they're doing. And it's also a way of sort of embedding that learning a bit more. I mean, the research shows us that we learn best when we're having fun. And even, you know, a choir of adults, when they gather together on a Monday night, let's have some fun as well while we're doing it. So, and the kinesthetic movement is all part of that, just imprinting learning on it's just multiple ways of learning something. And we call it stickability. So it makes it stick in your mind and you go, oh yes, I can associate that movement with that concept. So, yes.
So what brought you from Melbourne up to Queensland?
Well, we had a little inner period in Hobart, and Hobart was great. I really loved the place, but just sort of, I've always been a big city boy, you know? So Toronto, that sort of thing. You know, I love the vibrancy of it, you know? And so I thought, well, let's head back. But my wife's from Melbourne, so that meant Sydney was out. You know, the whole Sydney-Melbourne thing just wasn't going to work. And going back to Melbourne kind of felt like going back to the same old, same old. And we had a lot of colleagues here in Brisbane. Great choral scene in Brisbane. And so that was very attractive. So, and also, I'd also been speaking with Professor Scott Harrison about studying at the Conservatorium. So it seemed like a natural progression, we'll put it that way, to come to the best city in the country instead of settling for second best.
I'd agree with that. And what did you study at the con here?
So I did my Doctor of Musical Arts, and I was studying, well, my project was to look at choral rehearsal processes. In a way, it was kind of a way to spend time with my heroes. So in my doctorate, I got to spend time with Lydia Adams again, and also Elise Bradley, Karen Grills over in New Zealand, Hilary Apfelstadt, who's now the head of choral programs at the University of Toronto, and Carl Crossan from Adelaide, who I've always admired for a long time. And I got to follow them around and pester them and ask them questions, and it was great, actually. And it's funny because a lot of times when you're doing your doctorate, you do have moments. I had moments, but I remember very early an external group had come to work on us and help us, and they said, make sure that you have a project that will sustain you. And I think that was the great thing, was that my project really sustained me, even in those moments where I didn't want to sit down and write anything or do anything like that. And it's like, no, this is the goal.
And in a nutshell, what did your research sort of suggest?
Well, I was looking at community groups and the things that they do, and I was looking at these international experts, and in effect also looking at what I do, and in comparison, and was there best practice and was there commonalities? The great thing about conducting is all conductors and choirs are so different, and yet they all come with great outcome, you know? And so I was kind of looking, well, were there commonalities? And the biggest commonality was building the sense of community. So a choir is a community, and it's just a community of people whose common love is making music together. So that was sort of the big finding, which seems like a bit of, well, duh kind of thing, but it's everything else kind of springs out of that idea of community and how they come together. Then there are various other little, things like choosing repertoire and stuff like that. But the big one was community.
And what led you to the Queensland Choir?
Well, it's interesting. I had the privilege a few times of stepping in for Kevin. I think it was during COVID times when he might have had COVID or something like that. And I just thought, wow, here's a great community of people. They're so switched on, and they're having, they're really passionate about what they're doing, and lots of potential with their singing and things like that. And I thought, a really great group. So when Kevin announced his retirement, I think I probably handed in my application earlier than I've ever had. I think the deadline was March, and I had it in by December 1st or something like that.
Now, one thing we're passionate about at the Queensland Choir, and one of the reasons why we launched Backstage, is to get people to join us. So if someone is, if we've piqued their curiosity with this video and they're keen to come and sing with us, but they're a little bit hesitant, what would you say to encourage them?
Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Put it that way. It can be daunting. I mean, going into any new situation can be daunting. But as we said, you're coming into a community of people who love music and to love to share that love of music with others. So if that's your passion, then this is probably the community for you. So we have an audition process, which sounds like a scary term. We're not looking for, I used to joke with some of my boys, I don't want you to sound like the Vienna Choir Boys or the Metropolitan Opera Chorus. But if you do, that's great, because I write a book and tell everybody how I did it. having a voice, having an interest in singing, being able to navigate your way around the score would be an advantage. If you have some sight singing, that's all right, but we provide you with tools. And give it a shot.
You're not going to glare at them by the piano while they're...
No,
right?
no. Do I look something like... I'm not an ogre. No. And I mean, that comes from my passion as well. We have an audition group. Yes, that's how we're set up. But having music for everyone has always been a big passion of mine. So we're looking for more friends to come and join us.